Hello, my name is Doris Schneink. I'm a journalist from Stern Magazine, and I'm very, very pleased to welcome here at the Frankfurt Book Fair in our shared apartment kitchen, Mrs. Asli Erdoğan. Mrs. Erdoğan, she's one of the most important, famous Turkish writers. She's a human rights activist and symbol for resistance against despotism. She had an early career as a physicist working on elementary particles. In 2016, Mrs. Erdoğan has been arrested in Istanbul and accused of propaganda against the Erdoğan regime. She wrote a letter from prison appealing to the media and public not to forget political prisoners in Turkey. And this letter was read at the opening of the Frankfurt Book Fair in 2016. Mrs. Erdoğan, it's a pleasure to welcome you here. I'm very happy. Hello.
Hello, it's a pleasure to be here.
Yes.
Is your microphone working?
Yes, your microphone does work. Everything
Okay.
is fine. We want to talk about your new book, which is not a really new book because it's a compilation of texts you have written between 2003 and 2005. It's a Requiem für eine verlorene Stadt, a Requiem for a lost city. And what does it mean for you to publish these texts for the first time, an opening for German readers?
Well, the original title was In the Silence of Life, in Life's Silence. And it was a book or text that were written in a very specific period, a period of, let's say, mourning. I had a tragic death in my life, and then combined with a disease, combined with a social lynch campaign. So without even realizing, I started to write my first Requiem. There are also some new texts in the book written in the last years. So each book is a new collection. The book changes with me, with time, with each edition. Each editor chooses different parts. So it's a Requiem, but it's still alive.
To be honest, I find it quite difficult now here discussing a book. It's translated in German. I read it in German. You wrote it in Turkish. We talk about it in English,
Yeah.
and we are both not native speakers. But we will read some passages later from the book just to give our listeners an impression of what the sound is like. But let me first ask you one question. The book is a many-voiced chant, like a choir. And one has to listen very, very carefully to hear each voice. What would you say is the leading theme of this chant, of this choir?
Well, the leading themes are silence and void. Everything ends up in silence and loss, let's say. There is a real death in the end. But this death is kind of, it's a tragedy, and a tragedy is actually, as the author confesses, easier than the void. There is at least some blood to fill in the void. But this book is something that is, I think, at the core of my writing of myself, and that is absence. The author looks for the core, for the self, and what she finds is something lacking. And there is also a very strong female voice, passed from generation to generation, even from the Egyptian Book of the Dead, from the mother to the daughter. But this lack, this absence, something unfinished in each destiny, is passed from woman to woman. in a way, it's a female Odysseus, let's say, who no longer has an Ithaca. But it is my very first female book, I think I'm proud to say.
Great. I think it takes great courage to go to this void and describe this human experience of being lost, that there is no place where one can feel safe. And when I read the book, I felt it made me, it was hard to go there. You take me to places I don't want to go. But then when you go there, it's really touching, and also it's so beautiful. The way you describe this void is beautiful. Does the beauty of literature and of writing comfort you, gives you a comfort and gives you the strength to write about this human existence?
Well, it's a difficult book for the writer and for the reader because there is no linearity. There are actually no characters. We just have voices, sometimes in fugue form. And the reader is free to enter from whatever text he or she wants, and to stay as much as he or she wants. It is really not an easy book to go all the way. I let the reader wander around in this void in a way, and the only thing that can help this journey is a feeling of perhaps some beauty. This book is written with words, really, not with ideas, not with stories. Words are on their own journey, more or less like out in the open sea. And some will be drowned, it's a metaphor from the book, and some will make it to the other side. So yes, there is an element of insecurity there also in the book for the reader. It's really like the open sea. I wanted it to be like that way, at least.
Maybe this is a good time to read two short passages from the book, and I will do it in German.
I know the passages at least.
You showed me what do you want me to read, and the first passage is called Das Wunder des Blutes. I will do it in German. Auch das ist meine Geschichte, meine Geburt, mein Tod und alles dazwischen. Zwischen so vielen Geschichten noch eine Geschichte, die an der Stille zerschellt. Zwischen so vielen Seiten noch eine Seite, die schnell gelesen und, kaum umgeblättert, schon vergessen ist. Vielleicht nur ein Komma zwischen zwei gleich langen Sätzen, zwischen gestern und heute. Das Wunder des Wassers besteht darin, die von Jägern abgeschossenen Vögel wieder an die Oberfläche zu bringen, sie zwischen den Widerschein der Wolken zu schicken, den so lange angelegten Flügeln einen neuen Himmel zu versprechen. Und das Wunder des Blutes wird darin bestehen, meine Worte ins Leben zu schicken und meiner Zerfetztheit einen neuen Leib zu versprechen. Deshalb streife ich nachts auf dem Friedhof der Worte umher und rufe den Toten verzweifelt zu, wacht auf, wacht auf. Und mein Gedächtnis wartet, als irdenes Gefäß unter dem Kreuz. Es wartet und wartet. And I will continue with another passage you recommended me strongly. Oops, where is it? And this one is called nicht zu schreien, not to cry. Von den blutverschmierten, verendenden Wörtern kriecht eins auf mich zu, als würde es an einem zusammengezimmerten Sarg schleppen, trägt es schwer an meinem zukünftigen Ich und legt mir dieses stille Kind auf den Schoß. Mit eiskalten Händen klammert es sich an das Eisengitter des Gedächtnisses und presst mit aller Kraft die Zähne zusammen, um nicht zu schreien. Nicht jenes eine Wort hinauszuschreien, das es schreien möchte. Das Wort, das in der Dunkelheit seinen Weg findet, widerhallend verklingen und ohne Entgegnung bleiben wird. So it's about a word that is
Yeah.
brought to life like a woman that brings life a
Well,
child. What
the
what
book-
does it mean to you?
The book is actually following those two metaphors, the self and the words. And time to time they meet. The self, or I, is brought by a word. But then, of course, it's just a child. And it's just a memory, a frozen memory. So in the book we will see actually many passages similar of the words personifying in a way, continuing their journey. And like the self, it's not only me, just self in general, is built or created or given life, reincarnated with the words. The words are bringing the blood, let's say. And then they take it back again. It is always a process that goes both directions. The self also is lost and dissolves into the words.
The birth of the self, we know thousands of stories where the birth of the self is because of the decency, die Herkunft, the family, the brothers, the sisters, father, mother, the country, the language. So this is missing. Why does the self in your book has to create itself from words and not from a,
Because I didn't want to look at it at the level of, let's say, identity, which I find in a way too simple. And there's so much literature that deals with that. Family, of course, it's part of me as well, my identities. But I wanted to look at it at a deeper level. If I erase this whole thing of identity, of being this, that, what will remain? That was my quest. And this ancient voice, that there's a passage from Egyptian Book of the Dead. And it's a very, let's say, risky metaphors I chose. They are really old and out of fashion. Mother, justice, heart. And these are, they were back there from the 3,000-year-old texts. And they still speak to me. And I wondered if I say in 21st century, my heart, what exactly do I mean? And these were the two things that I found in the core, the heart and the mother. The mother is the oldest story. And this void, of course, again, something untold, something unfinished, something lacking.
I find as a reader, I'm quite lost. It's not easy to get into the sound and into this depth of finding, of talking, of reading about being a self. But then the language is so seducing. The language is so beautiful that it's quite of comforting to read it, and it felt like you get stronger while reading it.
Thank you for saying that. Well, this book, especially the first passages, were written only 10 days after I got death news. And I don't talk about death directly in the book. I kind of put it aside. Uh, so it's sometimes I feel it was very close to madness. Uh, but yeah, I think in the end there is a feeling of survival. That the reader survives this journey and is hopefully enriched with this journey.
We are sitting here in a shared apartment kitchen. Kitchens are places of warmth, of comfort. You find food and friends, and you are really deeply satisfied. Feelings that are completely absent in your book. Is writing your way to survive this existential sadness? Or do you have kitchens in your life as a metaphor?
Well, writing has both ways. It kills me and it makes me survive at the same time. It's a way to find my story and then to lose it almost immediately after finding it. This feeling of for writing is a way of perhaps looking for something permanent. But then in the end, it's a way for me at least to discover the total opposite, transiency. Nothing is permanent. And this feeling, probably this book also gives that. Everything is transient, every state of being, every story. And through this book, I rediscovered that feeling again.
What about coffee and cigarettes? The narrator seems to be a heavy consumer of both. Do they help in this transiency, these two drugs, or did I get something wrong here?
Yeah, in the end, there is one part which ends, she says, yeah, I can stay settled as long as I have coffee and the cigarettes. All is okay, everything will go on. A new day is born, the life will go on, and yeah, there is the simple daily life coming into the book. After all, the book, Egyptian Book of the Dead, the words, all this. No, that's the simple daily life that we carry on. And in my case, cigarettes and coffee really help.
There is one beautiful sentence. Life is like the first puff from a cigarette. And so it starts great and it burns down very soon and it makes sick.
And it is also, it doesn't taste so well after the second or third puff. The first is great, but then, and it kills you very, very slowly with pleasure. You get used to being killed and you start sort of enjoying being killed. And
Mrs. Erdogan, in 2016 you left Turkey, you have been imprisoned for 6 months and you came into exile, living first in Frankfurt for 2 years and now in Berlin. What are your experiences as a refugee?
Well, before I would say exile is the metaphor of human being. Our first story started with the exile from paradise. So it was part of me and everybody. It's perhaps modernity deeply put this feeling into us. That's why we are searching for these identities and homelands. And I think as this wound is in everybody that we feel exile in this world. But of course, there's also the reality of being in actual and in absolute exile, which is documents, loneliness, diseases, lack, library, my 3,000 books left in Istanbul, my writing left there, clothing, half there. It's really a second prison. And for me, the most difficult part, I would say, is the exile from my own language. I thought they would never be able to extradite me from Turkish, but in fact it was wrong. They did. I mean, I do really like Paul Celan, and I do understand him a bit more. That your relation with your own native language can be really very painful. And in exile, it started in prison, my crisis with Turkish, and the exile made this crisis much deeper, let's say. I'm losing my language, and also my feeling to my language I'm losing. I'm no longer passionate about Turkish. This passion is drying out.
Though there is a big Turkish community in Germany.
Yeah, but it's not the community, or it's not the native, or it's not the daily talk. You have to read in your language. My library is in Turkey. You have to live new experiences in that language. Or I should say I, not rather than you. I must fall in love with Turkish. I must have a fight in Turkish. I must have strong feelings in Turkish.
In German society now, there are more than 1 million refugees from Ukraine, and in 2015 we had refugees from Syria. And in many, I talked to some people, guests here, and they said, yes, we have in our family, in our kitchen, there are sitting Ukrainian people. We adopted them. Do you feel that German society is kind of more sensitive for what it means for being living in exile, for the situation and the loneliness of people being in exile? Can you see something there? Does it change?
Well, I mean, there is a big Turkish community that came in, the Turkish Kurdish community, let's say, that come from Turkey in the last years, and Germany was quite welcoming. But of course, the focus has shifted from Turkey. I mean, now there are more urgent people in the more urgent needs. So Turkey became out of fashion in a way. But I'm not the only exile. Neither those coming from Turkey are the only exiles. If the story continues like that, there will be, I'm afraid, more wars. War is a continuous reality of our political system that we built all together. The humanity built this, and it's continuously producing wars. And wars means more and more exiles and refugees and asylum seekers. And yeah, we need this thing called empathy, but I'm afraid it's always limited, you know. And I feel it myself when I became a more ill person, when I had chronic diseases, when I became an ex-prisoner. Actually, my empathy started to get less. But then I told myself, what's the point of suffering then, if I can't transform into empathy? Then suffering is just useless and pointless. Maybe we can look at our own wounds to develop more empathy for those that are coming from more difficult circumstances.
Mrs. Erdogan, I'm a science journalist, and I was very curious when I read that you studied physics in Istanbul and that you did research on the elementary particles at CERN, at the big machine in Geneva. So you worked as a scientist on the most fundamental questions of life. Where do we come from? What is the world made of? why did you abandon the scientific approach to these questions? Or maybe you never abandoned them, I don't know. I'm very curious to learn.
Well, I was very passionate about physics, as I was very passionate about classical ballet is also one other thing I did. But then I never really wanted to be a professional dancer, and I realized I could not survive the world of physics. I mean, better let this passion stay platonic. We don't have to be married. And this lifestyle of a physicist in a major research lab was very disappointing to me. I was too naive, I still am, but I imagined people wandering on the secrets of universe, and I saw a big war, really a power game and everything. But now, of course, it's everywhere. In literature too, there is a power game, all this, the relations, connections, networks, money, marketing, and I'm allergic to this. I have really trouble dealing with the ego. And in the physics world, especially for a woman, it's a quite masculine world and quite competitive. I just couldn't survive anymore.
Yeah. So that's the politics, but what about the insights as a physicist offered? Was it not interesting to you?
Well, it partially, yes. The questions of universe are of course interesting, but it didn't help the wound. I felt my real questions are somewhere else, and that's why I started writing actually at CERN, that the wound needed some other voices, some other questions, and something else to lick my wounds, let's say, not to heal them, but just to lick them like an animal, perhaps. That's what I do with words. Physics, no, it didn't.
Mrs. Erdogan, this is quite, yeah, you are more in literature. This is your life, this is your passion. I thank you very much, and we want to take a picture for our refrigerator here in this kitchen. And so we could talk on and on. It's a wonderful book. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you very much.